So the amygdala is the part of the brain that allowed us to learn for the first time. It's what separates us from animals who are simply instinctual. It's also our source of emotional memory. So anything that happened to us, we're sad, we're frustrated, we're happy, it's stored in our amygdala. It's like a little computer chip that remembers all of our emotional memories. It's also the part of our brain that answers one critical question of human survival. Does anyone know what that question is? Fight or flight. Exactly. It's the part of our brain that responds when we perceive a threat. Now we're going to come back to the amygdala, but I also want to share with you the part of the brain you're more familiar with, your neocortex or new brain. That's where your IQ resides. It's also the site of our prefrontal lobe, which is where we have our working memory. Working memory is where we hold our thoughts. If you're computer savvy, it's where we hold our RAM. If you're not computer savvy, forget what I just said. Okay? But essentially, working memory is where we hold our thoughts. So when we're calm, we can hold 6 or 7 thoughts plus or minus 2. That's why you can remember a 7-digit phone number, but not a 10-digit phone number. So everybody has 6 or 7 thoughts plus or minus 2. So when you're calm, somebody says something to you, you can access something from long-term memory, you can read something on a piece of paper, you can form a complex thought, see options, and respond, all very, very quickly. We have an incredibly fast processor. Our brains are incredibly fast. Okay? So remember this about the neocortex, our working memory. In the design of the human brain, which of these two parts, the amygdala or the neocortex, do you think responds to a perceived threat first? The amygdala. It sounds obvious because we're in an emotional intelligence program, but in fact, back in the early 90s, the leading neurologists of the day, neuroscientists, thought that the IQ responded first. And there was groundbreaking research done by Joseph Ledoux at New York University where they were able to leverage new MRI technology to see brain activity. They were able to determine that the amygdala responds up to 100 times faster than your IQ brain when it perceives a threat. So if you remember nothing else today, remember this, that we feel before we think. Emotions come before thought. We're all wired that way. You can't escape that. You can simply learn to manage that. Now, what's the impact of that? Well, let's say you're somewhere where this is actually a functional system. Let's say you're out in the jungle. Now, I know a lot of you don't spend a lot of time in the jungle, but go with me here because it's a good metaphor. You're in the jungle and a tiger jumps out at you. Your amygdala, the emotional part of your brain, remembers the last time a tiger jumped out, right? And it says, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. It starts to cause the release of chemicals that cascade through your body, adrenaline, cortisol. Blood moves to the major muscle groups, your heart rate increases, your breathing shortens, you're ready for fight or flight. In addition, the amygdala causes the release of chemicals into your brain that takes that working memory and starts to reduce how much working memory you have. It stops complex thought. Have you ever heard somebody say, I was so angry I couldn't think straight? That's exactly what's happening. Have you ever had a difficult conversation with a spouse or partner and 20 minutes later thought, oh, why didn't I say this and why didn't I say that? You think of all the good comebacks, right? Because in that moment, you didn't have all of your working memory. You couldn't think clearly. And it makes sense. The amygdala doesn't want you thinking. The tiger's jumping out doesn't want you thinking, gee, I wonder what kind of tiger that is. It just wants you to stand and fight or run for the tree. Okay? So the amygdala does what we call hijacks your thinking mind. Literally, we call this an amygdala hijack. And it can take your thinking mind and move you to a default behavior that may or may not be skillful. And it can be hallmarked by a strong emotional response. It can be very sudden. And when the dust settles, that's when you think, ooh, you know, why did I say this? Right? Why did I do that? You know, for me, for an example, when I was first learning this, if I was feeling overwhelmed, I was, not managing my time really well. I was in a meeting and there was a lot going on and somebody was explaining something that was taking them a long time to explain, right? And I'm smart, so I know what they mean. So what do? I interrupt them to let them know that I know what they mean? Yeah, how well does that connect me with them when I interrupt people? But in that moment, that's my default behavior, right, that I've learned. So it's really important that we understand that when we are triggered emotionally, right, that email comes in, ooh, it triggers us, type, reply to all, right? And then 20 minutes later you think, maybe I shouldn't have sent that email, right? But we were being driven to a default behavior. Our emotions were hijacking our thinking mind and moving us to a default behavior, okay? So that's why we say with such certainty that emotions drive behavior. Remember I said at the beginning, our emotions literally can force us into behaviors that may not be skillful.